Okay guys, let's get started. Sorry about the wait. Had some stuff that I was handling, but we will go ahead and get started. So I'm going to go ahead and pop up the server here, start the Cadalion client, and then hit screen. Alright, so there we go. Welcome to the stream, everybody. Thank you all so much for watching. Okay, so we left off, and I'm going to kind of show you where I'm at once it loads. Ooh, that hurt. Come on, Unity. No, it's starting. It's just being stupid. I should have started this earlier. I was like, I was thinking about it, but I was handling some stuff. Alright, so I'll show you kind of what I was working on. But we're gonna go on to a completely different track here, but I'll kind of show you what I was working on. Essentially, I'm working on this progress loading bar, which actually does work, but Unity is like sending me really weird data, so I gotta figure out what's going on with that data. I think it's the clamp function that I have on there currently, but we'll see. So you see it instantly jumps to full, and it's because of the way Unity is sending the progress. So as you see now, we have, we're in the game. So you can kind of see how that works. So essentially what's going on with this right now is that this is being sent wrong data by Unity, and the question is why. So But we're not going to worry about that. We are going to create a simple scene. And this is going to be called networking test. So we are going to, in this instance, we are going to go to our build settings. We are going to remove both of those and just add the networking test. And the reason that we're going to do that is because when I go to build this, it will only output certain things and keep the game running pretty quick, because what we need, we're going to be making a bunch of changes and I need to test this. So I need to have a very quick build kind of back and forth. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to go into my command handler. It's going to go into my login command. And I'm going to create a whole new command, and this is going to be called the entity handler. Now, what the entity handler is going to handle is going to be defined in our command types. Oops. Command types. Thank you. There we go. So the first one that we're going to handle, whoops, I'm an idiot, is entity. Now, everything in our game is going to be defined as an entity, regardless of what it is. So for instance, if it is synchronized across the network, it's an entity. If the player has any interaction with it, it's an entity. So basically, they are the building blocks of everything in our game, regardless of what they are, whether they're a player, whether they're an NPC, whether they're a mob, or like an item. It's all entities, and those are going to be handled in another set of routes, and that's going to be the entity routes. And this is going to be spawn, transform, rotate, scale, I'm going to change these up a little bit. Alright, and then the last one is going to be... Now, the way this is going to work, you know what, I'm going to pop open Critter real quick for you guys. So we're in a new file. So the way that this system is going to work is we have an entity, right? And we'll have a couple different scenes. So when the player moves from one scene to another, or from one level to another, this will be 1 and this will be 2. On the back end, when the player initiates a move, what's going to happen on the server is the server is first going to delete that entity from scene 1. Then it is going to spawn that entity on scene 2. So what happens essentially is if we go to enter a building, which may be a different scene, if we enter a different level, which may be a different area, then what will happen is essentially we're going to delete that entity from one scene and then add it to another. And so that is essentially how we're going to be moving things from scene to scene. And we can, define like a delete effect. So if we're destroying them, then we can define a destroy effect on whatever entity is spawned, and then we can tell the game to run that effect. So let's say if the player enters another level and gets removed from this current level, then what we can do is we can define on destroy, we're going to fade out this character. So there's different ways. We can have them explode. We can, whatever we want. So we're going to start out with a cube. We're going to make sure this cube is at the exact center of the world. I don't know why I did that. And then we're going to set the Y to 0.1. And we're going to set this to 1,000. So we have this big plane of existence now, which is what we want when we're going to be working with this networking stuff, because we're going to need the colliders, because most of the game's collision detection is going to be on the client end, but there will be other things where if the user is outside of a defined area, so for instance if they're hiding in a mountain or something, the server will be able to detect whether or not they're inside of the playable area, and if they aren't, then the server will be able to act accordingly. And I'll kind of show you how that stuff works in a little bit here. So the first thing that we're going to do with this is we need to texture it, and I'm going to do that through what is in here. We'll see, terrain, bush A, no, dirt rock A, it looks better. Dirty grass terrain. I like that. Alright. So it's not going to let us... oh, actually, it is. Okay, so we're going to tile this 50 by 50. Oh, see, it's actually not going to let us do it because of the fact that we don't have anything in here. So we're going to go into our materials. We're going to create a new material. We're going to call this ground 1. We're going to drag this in there. Then we're going to go to our dirty grass terrain. Drag that in. And then we're going to set this to 50. You know what? It may be like 0.5. No, it's not liking that. So why is my tiling not working correctly? The other thing I want to do is I want to reduce the shininess of that, because it's like, shouldn't be shiny, it's grass. The fade would work on that, I think. Yeah, it does. Not worried about it though. We want this to be opaque. Oh, come on. I just need to figure out. You know what? I'm not going to spend too much time worrying about the look of it. We'll figure out why it's not tiling at a later date. What we're really worried about right now is our kind of system. Okay. So in our... I need to open that up this way. Game plan. So one thing that we do need to do in here is we need to, under our networking, we need to create an entity manager. And what that is going to do okay. So we are going to set our entity ID more than one every time. So we're going to initialize our entity ID at 0. That way no entity can be 0. Actually, we're going to create a new class in here called entity. So now when we spawn a new entity, it's going to automatically set the ID for us. And that's a big deal, and I'll tell you why in a second. Not anything we need there. All right, perfect. So what we're going to do here is, okay, so I'm going to explain how our entity system works. And I think I'm actually going to do it on this pad here. And just kind of pop my screen up so you guys can see my beautiful face. So I can kind of explain how this stuff works. Okay. Okay, so essentially, we are going to have a bunch of entities in our game. So we're going to have, every E is going to represent an entity, by the way. Okay, so we have these two entities, right? So we have the entity up at 0, 0, and we have the entity at 5, 3. How do we define what entity is moving around on the screen, right? How do we define to our server what entity we're trying to move? Well, we're going to do that with an ID. Right? So the problem with doing this client side, because I could just define a ID client side, is let's say that I go to spawn an entity client side, right? And I give it the ID of 1. Now, before you are able to spawn your entity on the server, someone else at the same time spawns an entity. They both will be sent to the server as ID 1. So now we have a conundrum, right? We have two entities with an ID of 1. So what I do instead of doing that, when you go to spawn an entity, it goes to our server, which has an entity manager, and their IDs are pulled from the server. So if I go to spawn an entity and you go to spawn an entity at the same time, what will happen is we'll both hit the server, and the server will say, okay, I got your message first, your ID 1, and you are ID 2. And that's essentially how the entity manager works, and that's why our IDs are going to be super, super important. Because we need to ensure that the correct transformation information, that's movement, rotation, and scale, are being applied to the correct entity. So we're going to have some basic math classes in here. We're going to do that this way. Add math. Now we need to create a vector 3 class. And we're going to set that And then we're going to have one more math class, and this is going to be called Transform. No, we're fine with setting it this way. Then we are going to create a constructor for this. There we go. So now we need to return a new. Oops. So now we're returning vector 3, 0. So we can set position zero, and then we can do rotation, but our scale is going to be 1 across the board. And this stuff is going to be very important, and you'll see why in a bit. Okay. So now we have a way of setting our ID, setting our transformations. So what we're going to do now is we need to have an entity manager on this side as well, but I need to create a way of spawning objects. And the way that we're going to do that is by creating a scriptable object. And we'll call this spawnable entities. So instead of a mono behavior, this is going to be a scriptable object. And when we load back into Unity, you'll see something kind of strange happen with this. Okay, James, no problem. So you'll see that up here, it's changed, right? So what I need to do is this is going to be called an entity. So we need to change this to entity in Unity as well. Just trying to remember how I spawn a thing here. So I know that what I have to do here on our entity, which just went bye-bye. Create asset menu. That's what I'm looking for. Let's double check this real quick, guys. I need to be sure. Because I think this does need to be spawnable entities. So it should create, and then there should be a Cadalion Online thing here. Alright, so that's done. Okay, so it's wherever our cursor last was, so that's fine. And I do think this needs to be spawnable entities. And I'll kind of show you how this stuff works. So I need to fix this because this needs to be spawnable entities. So what we need to do here is we need to create a serializable class called entity, and it's going to have a public string name and a public game object prefab. So the way this works, and this is actually pretty cool. We'll call this networking assets. So we click on our networking assets, we go up to Assets, Create, Cadalion Online, Spawnable Entities. And we're fine with our spawnable entities. Now what that does is that gives us the ability to create spawnable entities, which I know is weird. So we're going to create a name and a game object. And the way that we're going to get these game entities is pretty simple. This is the server. Okay. We're going to call a static method called get spawnable, and we're going to give it a name. Then we're going to for each through all of our entities. I don't know if it's actually going to work that way, but it'll be fine. You know what? We're fine. We don't need that. Okay. So we are going to grab an entity ent equals null. If ent.name.toLower equals name, and ent is going to, we'll put e here, just make it easier, is going to equal e. And then at the end, we're going to return ent. Now that gives us the ability to create spawnable entities from our asset folder. We're going to create a pool later on that will allow you to pull entities from the pool rather than having to spawn new ones. But for now, this is going to work for us. Now I'm going to, in our thing here, I'm going to capitalize this. So, we need to have a new script here. The first thing that we're going to do is we are going to create an empty, and this is going to be called Game Manager. So the first thing that we have to do is have Unity stop freezing up on us. That would be nice. We're going to create a game client. We are going to create a client manager. And then we're going to create a new script called Entity Manager. And we're going to put that on here as well. Apparently not. It's not done doing its thing yet. Okay, so now I think we can apply our Entity Manager on here. Perfect. So now in our Entity Manager, we are going to have we'll put that on there and then see what happens. So we go to our game manager and we'll see what that does, because it should give us the ability to drag our spawnable entities on there. If it doesn't, then we'll figure out what's going on with it and fix it. So it's not popping up. I think it is in the version control. We'll see. It's weird namespace for them to put that in, but if that works. Yeah, I'm going to return that to asset bundle because that seemed like what I wanted it to be. let's see if we can drag this asset bundle onto there. Let's see if we can drag this asset bundle onto there. Does not seem like we can. Give me 1 second, guys. I will actually see, because I have some code for this somewhere. Just can't remember all this stuff off the top of my head. Okay, perfect. So it's actually looking for our spawnable entities. And then I can drag that right on there. Boom. Now we can create a new prefab, which I'm going to create just a simple sphere. That's what I thought. Okay. Gee, that's such a weird place. All right. So I'm going to spawn in our standard assets. So I'm going to select our spawnable entities. We're going to create 2. The first one is going to be called player. And they are going to be spawned as a FPS controller. The second one is going to be a net player, and that is going to be spawned as a new prefab that I'm going to create now. And that is going to be defined by our sphere. Now, the way this works is when the player spawns in, they are going to be called by, they are going to be spawned as an FPS controller. Our net player will be spawned as a sphere. And the way this is going to work is we are going to define a few types. So our command types here, we need to go down here and we need to create a new thing called entity type. So and I see things run across my lawn all the time, it's weird. This is going to be called player, and net player. Now the way that we're going to handle doing that is by going to our entity manager in our command handlers. Now we are going to remove these guys. And this is going to be spawn read and spawn write. So this is going to be our entity handler, and we're going to handle entity command types. Then we're going to handle spawn read and spawn write on the route of entity routes dot spawn. Now this could be a little interesting, but bear with me. The way that we're going to do this is going to be different later on, because we're only going to spawn things that are on certain maps. So if you're on a map, then we'll spawn that object in. But for now, we're just going to do global spawning. And the way that's going to work is we are going to we're going to read our packet, which for now will be nothing. So we're just going to send a command. So command handler, send command. Our command type is going to be entity. Our route is going to be entity routes dot spawn. Yep, I deleted it because I'm stupid. And this is going to be packet dot from. Now I know that's a little weird, but kind of hear me out here. The second thing that we need to do is call our command handler. I don't exactly remember how I handled this, so we'll see. So we're going to, in our write, we're going to grab our player. From data 0, and the 2 is going to be our player. Yeah, okay. And then secondly, it's going to be entity routes dot spawn true and then our data, and this will be packet dot from. This is 2. Packet dot 2. Valentin, welcome to the channel. Thank you for watching. I do appreciate it. program we have. Do we have a send net server send to all? Yeah. Okay. So I do really, the best thing I can do is just kind of just let that do its thing. Yep. So there's really no to on that if it's an all, but that's okay. So we're going to have a second one here as well, and this is going to be a type. We'll hard code this for now as player and net player. And this is going to be, you know what, we'll do 0 and 1. You know what, a lot easier if I just do int entity type dot player, and then int entity type dot net player. Then we get an int type equals int data1, and then packet dot write our type. One sec, guys, I'll be right back. Alright, I'm back, guys. Sorry about that. Alright, so what we did, I'm going to explain it for those of you who aren't here. We're spawning, every time we spawn something, we need to do two things. We need to spawn the player object, and we need to spawn the net player. And the reason that we need to do that is because of kind of a couple things. We need to spawn the player because we don't currently have a player in the scene. Then we need to spawn the net player on everywhere else. So this true here is an all. So you'll see on here that we have int command int root and then bool all. So we have our entity spawn true. And we have entity spawn here, and that's it. So we're not sending it to everyone. We're only sending this one back to the player, and then we're sending this one to everyone. So what we're going to have to do is we are going to have to grab we're going to have to grab a couple things. I'm not sure exactly what we're sending. I think, are we sending the account ID? What are we sending back to the player? Because that's a good question here. When we build our packet, we're sending our command ID and our command root. We need to send back our session ID. Because no, we don't. Because if we send the session ID to... this is an interesting conundrum here. Because if we send the session ID to our player, then what's going to happen is... the other thing is we need to get an ID. So we have our type. We need to get an ID. So that gives us the ID of our spawned object. I'm trying to think here, guys, because we need to be able to send something back to our user. And I think the best way to do that currently is to just add an ID to this. Nice. So we need to, in our packet, we need to get our player ID. So we're going to set in our packet, the first thing that we want to send is our player ID. And then the first thing we're going to read is our player ID. Which we just want to read it. So we're just going to read data dot read int 32. Because our player is going to be gotten from here. Although this would be a good idea, you know, I'm going to int ID, because later on what we can do is we can check our ID. So if an ID comes from somewhere that does not have a correct ID, so it kind of gives us 2 layers of protection on that. So we have both the player ID and the session ID. So if the player ID and the session ID don't match up, guess what? You're hacking. So the first thing I want to do is I want to grab my from read data center connection. I'm going to do public int ID get private set. Then we're going to call this player ID. And then we're going to, of course, the first thing we're going to do when we get a packet is we're going to read our player ID. Read data dot int 32. No, I want to read. Why does that say platform ID? It's player ID. Thank you. All right, and then I do want to do the first thing I do. No, that's fine. Okay. Now what I want to do here is in certain situations, I want to discard packets. And this is going to be one of our situations where we're actually going to discard a packet, and I'll show you what I mean. So I want to rebuild that built, and then this is going to be the entity handler. Entity handler. Entity. Entity routes. Spawn. And we're going to do spawn read and spawn write. Now, in this instance, we are going to say if So at this point, we need to say if type equals entity type net player, and we need to store our player ID, which is pretty easy to do. We have our session ID here. This will be private string player ID equals -1. This would be int. Sorry, guys. Public int player ID, and we're going to do this as an underscore because we don't want to have conflictions. Return underscore player ID. And then in our set session, we also want to pass in our int player ID. This dot underscore player ID is equal to player ID. Oops. And then we're going to run into an issue in our session handler, which is okay. This is the one. There we go. Because we need to get packet.from.id. Player ID. From ID. There's an ID here. Oh, packet.player ID. There we go. Is it player ID or is it from ID? Which one did I set that as? It's player ID. Okay. And the packet.player ID is equal to, or is not equal to, game client.instance.player ID. So what we're saying is we're spawning a network player, and you know what? I think I can do this easier. And the way I can do that is I can say public bool is me get return game client dot instance dot player ID is equal to player ID. So now in my entity handler, I can say and not packet dot is me. Okay, perfect. So now I can tell whether or not the packet that is being sent to me is a reply from me. So yeah, so I can tell if it's from me or not. So the way that I'm going to do this now is on our spawn right. We really don't need to do anything for our spawn right, just our spawn read. So we'll say on entity created, or we'll say spawned. This will be an entity type. And we're going to have to get our entity ID. So int ID. So we do need to read one more thing, because I think we sent our type first and then our ID. Entity manager. Entity handler. Yeah, type and then ID. Which, like I said, this is a little sloppy right now, but that's okay because we'll figure it out in a bit. By the way, James, can you hear me? Just so that I know I'm not talking to thin air here. Can anyone hear me? Alright, cool. Just want to make sure I'm not talking to myself here. Okay. So this is where things get a little interesting. So we need to see if is a player, then we're going to set game object dot instantiate to spawnable entities dot instance get spawnable player dot preframe. Okay, so now we need to define where our spawn point is. This is going to be a transform. Right, and the reason that we're doing it that way is because if we spawn the object at 0, 0, then there is a good freaking chance that our object is going to spawn half into the floor and then just fall into the abyss. Alright, so we'll go to our game manager, and we are going to set a spawn point. So we're going to create empty, we're going to call this spawn point. This is going to be at 0, 0, 0, and we're going to drag this up above the ground a little bit. Perfect. Alright, we are going to remove our main camera. And I know that seems strange, but we're going to be spawning our player that way. So, overwrite. So I'm going to need to spawn my player. So we're going to say scripts C# script player spawner. This is going to be a simple little script that basically just says if we're not currently spawned, then we need to spawn ourselves. Now what I'm going to do in our game client here, I need to have a boolean here, public bool connected, get set. Now when we're connected, we're going to set this dot connected to true. So now in our player spawner, there we go. So we're going to say bool spawned equals false if not spawned equals true. If game client.instance.connected is not equal to null and this is a little ugly, but I'm gonna just we're gonna roll with it for a moment. All right. Especially since this is gonna kind of be, it's gonna be different. Nice. Spawn. We're not sending nothing. Alright, let me double check and make sure that we're not reading anything. We're not. So, we start our server. Well, at least you're getting caught up. So, on our game manager, we're gonna wait for this to be done. But then at that point, we have to assign our spawn point and then apply our player spawner on it as well. So, okay, so we can now assign our spawn point and player spawner. Now, when I start this, ooh. Oh, okay. Now we'll start this up and see if we get a spawn. Maximize. Ah, that's why. Now I have to double check our server for the correct, which, like I said, all of this stuff is getting changed, so don't think that you're seeing anything too crazy here. Oh, because in our player, packet, packet. That should work. Let's see. It didn't like something. ID. Type is int. Maybe that's why. You know, I think the problem is here in my packet. Let's see. Let's see our call stack. Line 38 on session.error. So I can fix this, but I definitely want to fix my session error problem too. Let's see, in our networking session manager, player validator, yes. So it's an int. Session manager, session handler. Data 1 is an int. Okay, so let's see, that should resolve the crashing problem. Session error, perfect. So now we're not receiving an error on that side. I know how to fix it on this side. The issue is fixing it on that side. So, okay. So the second thing that we need to do is we're connected, but we don't have a session ID. And we're going to handle that in a similar way to our connected by saying when we get our session, we'll set has session true. Then in our player spawner, we'll say and game client dot instance dot has session. Because we can't send our session data if we don't have it. Forwarded message. So now we're not sending our entity. Let's do this. There we go. Okay. We're gonna set this to not maximize on play, just so that we know what's happening. I just remembered that I forgot to do something, but it's not a big deal. I want to see if this works first. Okay. So in our packet, we're writing our session ID first and then our player ID second. On our server side, we are sending our player ID first. Which could be a problem. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go into our command handler. That could be a problem. Oh my, what? Coming here and around at me? Huh? Alright, give me 1 sec, guys. I'll be right back. I gotta have to get my dog her eye drops, apparently. Her eyes are getting bad again. I'll be right back. Alright, people, I'm back. I had some time to think about this. And I think I know the best way of doing this at this point. Server side, the issue that we're having is I'm sending the packet, the player ID, before we even have it. So, we're going to have a from. And I'm going to put that here. And we'll write it first or last. When am I grabbing this player ID first? So we'll do it first. Okay, so we're gonna have to update a couple of our handlers. Well, we're gonna have to update all of our handlers, but that's okay. At the end of the day, you know, having stuff be, you know, what we need it to be. Oh, a lot of these already have our from. No, that's really good. A lot of these already have our from. Ooh, the only problem is now. So we need to set our from on our command handler, which is good. That's what we need to do. So p dot from equals from, and we'll do that on each one. Packet net player. I don't know why I keep having that set that way. Okay. Okay. So now we can set 2 to p dot from on pretty much any of these, and remove these. This needs to be 0, 0. I know it's a little confusing, but just bear with me, guys. Like I said, this is going to end up making things a lot easier. Okay, so now this one's first. Okay. So the entity handler's fixed, our login handler. And then our session handler. Okay, so that should actually give us what we're looking for. So now the player ID is sent first. He does not exist. Packet. So now this should actually give us the correct stuff. So let's see. So it looks like the server may have crashed. No, it didn't. So the question is, we sent the command entity. Why did it not get to our entity handler? Alright, so console.log, right line, because I'm not working in JavaScript right now, got entity spawn. So we'll run that. Got root connection. Sending command entity. Did not get entity spawn. So the first thing I need to do though is I need to go into build settings, then player settings, resolution, run in background, because we don't want the game to stop running just because I flipped over to, check the server. We did not reach the... Oh, you know why we didn't reach it? We have two problems. Problem A is that the command handler here does not contain our entity handler type. Problem B is that our command handler here also does not have our our entity handler type. All right. One moment, guys. Alright guys, sorry about that. Okay, so we are... Oh crap, what was my call stack? I'm an idiot.
What the hell did you say?
Different position. So we're starting on packet line 25. And then we're going to... Alright, so we're starting at 53, 14, 44, and then spawn read line 25. So entity handler, spawn read line 25. So we have our command handler, send command all. Oh, I have these being set up in the wrong places. On this one. So that's part of our issue. And I need to send CMD there. Okay, sorry, we made some pretty big changes here on this, and I'm just trying to make sure that we have everything we need to make sure that this goes along correctly. Okay. So it does not look like we are spawning anything. Let me double check why. Player spawner. Spawnable entities. It's our entity manager that does this. So, if we're not a net player, you know what? We can simplify this. We can say if type is equal to net player and packet dot is me, return. That way we're not hitting that if, you know, it is a net player, but it should not be a net player. So we should be able to spawn our player. That generally happens when you're not in a stable state, or when you're in a stable state. So what happens is when you're at the beginning, things are very fluid. So you're, so this, that worked. Spawning entity 3 and spawning entity 4. That is definitely not what I wanted, though, because we should be plus your player ID is client instance player ID. When you're in a stable state, that means that everything is working fine, and it you know, you don't have any major changes that have happened. So if you need to make some pretty major changes to get things to work a certain way or a new way, then what you end up with is all of this code that was stable is now unstable because you made one change to the way a core system works. So if you have a stable core system and you make a change to it, it tends to break everything else. And that's okay. You need to be able to take your unstable system that you've unstabilized and then restabilize that system, because, you know, so my player ID is 5. So the question here is, deleted, okay, cool. What is my, so I'm gonna go ahead and we are going to take, let's see, there we go. So like I said, once you have a more stable system and then you kind of mess with the core pieces of that stabilized system, it tends to throw everything else off balance. But the mark of a good coder is someone who can take that unstabilized system and restabilize it. Otherwise, what you end up with is a bunch of band-aids over things, and that causes problems later on down the road. So if they really don't know what they're doing, then what you'll end up with is a unstable system with a bunch of band-aids holding it together and hoping that it's not going to, you know, explode at some point. Okay. The from ID is 8, and your player ID is 7. So I'm gonna guess here what's happening is that in our packet, when we get our when we get our session, so we should only be adding a player one time. So we should only be creating that one time. So let's take a look at our session manager, or our session handler. We are getting our player from the from. And then we are creating from the connection, creating a new player to add to our session manager. So when we return, let me see, how did I set this up? Because it should only be... So it should be returning just that regular ID. So the issue is when we got our player ID, it was 7. Now when we've created our entity, the player ID that it's sending back is 8. So we need to figure out why our from, when we send this, is that way. So our packet.from is being set here. So let's start there. So our session manager, if it exists, so that means if our session ID that we're sending exists within our clients, right? Then we're going to get our from. You know, let's do this. We'll do console.writeLine got session for session ID. You know what my guess is here? Because I sent the session ID first. So let's double check. I think it would say invalid session if that's not right, but let's double check it just to be sure. So we are sending our player ID second, which is correct. So creating new session for now this will tell us, and I can close the debug log here. This will tell us okay, so it did find our session, but it's still sending back a different player. So now we just need to hunt down why. So let's start in our command handler. So our from is coming from the from, which we are getting. And, you know, let's just start with the spawn handler for the moment. Packet from. So let's start back at our command handler. Whoops. And read through this. So, when we get a packet, we are validating that packet we're creating the packet from here. That's player, not packet. Oh my god, Chaos Raid, wow. Oh boy. So we're getting our session ID here, and the from is being set there. And we saw through our output here that we're not getting a different player ID. We're getting the same one. So we're sending our packet.from. And our from, setting p.from there, and then from.id. That means for some reason we have a new player being created. So I think the easiest thing to do now is at this point just set a breakpoint. So we're going to continue execution. Oops. Cool, so we are going through that. Oh, I can continue. All right. We'll go ahead and do this. So what I need to do here in our player Alright, so now let's go ahead and start this guy up. Wait a minute. Wait, we're literally not getting... No, I need to restart Unity. It's tripping. It literally is not sending any data to the server anymore. Oop. No. I'll be right back, guys. Okay, I am back. So the question now is, let's go ahead and, I'm going to go ahead and no. So the question is, why is it not sending, there we go. Okay. So, new player created 1, new player created 2. So, creasting, I love that. So new player 1 is created before the connection, which is fine, but we should not be creating a session for that player. Oh, we're not. It's hitting here. So why does it think it's 1? That's the question. It's like when we get the correct session back, it's using the old player ID, because it is. Hold on. Okay. So here's what was happening. It was a small order of operations problem. So I'll kind of explain what was going on. I'll run you through the code so you can kind of see what was happening. What was happening was we were sending back the from the original packet, which had the original player that was a temporary player, right? The temporary player 1, basically. So I think what we need to do is when we're creating a temporary player, so we'll say if not no session, then we add an ID. Otherwise, So essentially what was happening was we had an ID of 1 because we were creating a temporary player to get a connection from a session from the server. And then we were sending back our temporary session ID and not our new session ID. So now it's sending back -1, but give me a second, I can tell you why it's doing that. Because we're sending back packet.from and not player. Okay, so this problem should be resolved. Okay, so now my from ID is 1 and my player ID is 1, which is what we want. So now the question is line 21. So now our server connection is fixed. Welcome back, welcome back, Valentin. I'm sorry, my brain is on something else, and you kind of like popped in like right in the middle of me thinking about something. But yeah. So our server problem is fixed. The question now is, why is this blank? Because it shouldn't be blank. The reason that it's blank is because I'm an idiot, and I should be lowering both of these things. So spawnable entities. This should be .2 lower. Boom. Player spawned. So I need to turn the footsteps ons off because that is ridiculous. But anyway, so now we have our player spawning. Now we need to figure out why it's still spawning why it's trying to spawn our net player. Because if I do if resp equals entity type, yeah, my bad. I'll fix that before I start it up again. Okay. Oh, you know what? I can, I'm going to reset that. Because I don't want errors. Well, rigid body FPS controller it is. I'm also an idiot. That fixes that. Now let's see if it spawns the net player, because it should. Does not look like it spawned 2 entities. It looks like it just spawned 1. Sending command entity. It got data. Checked it. Spawned entity 7. Got it, checked it, and did not spawn entity 8. So there you go. That worked. So here is what we're going to do. We're going to do a new build. When do you need to head to bed there, James? Okay, cool. So we're gonna go ahead and test this, and then I'm gonna grab me some lunch, and then I'll come back and restart the stream after lunch. So we'll go ahead and test this, make sure that everything works correctly, and then we'll start doing some tests. So, and then we'll continue. I mean, after these tests. Give me 1 second, guys. Be right back. Alright guys, I am back. Let's go ahead and start this up. Now, here's the thing that's going to happen though. Any player that's connected after our current player is not going to see a spawn. And that's okay. We will fix that once we get onto more pressing matters, like the mapping, the leveling system. So where I don't mean like leveling as in player leveling. I mean level as in, literally the player, spawns in and then they're in a particular level area map, the mapping system basically. So we have a character here. We're going to walk backwards just a little bit and kind of look at the sky, because we should be able to see a player spawn on this side. There it is. So this is our net player, right here. It's not going to synchronize it with this guy yet. But yeah, there it is. And then if I look backwards, you can't actually see my other player anywhere, and it's not going to move around on here yet. But we did get another player spawning in, which is huge. So I'm going to go ahead, eat dinner, do a couple of my little things that I need to do around the house. And then we will come back and we will start synchronizing these players and start working on a level system, where a map system, excuse me. I need to stop saying level. We'll work on a map system. So I'll be back in around 30 minutes to an hour. We'll say around 45 minutes. So I want to thank everybody for watching. If you want to see me get these characters spawning in together and actually walking around so you can actually see them, then come back when we go live. We will make sure that we're sending out messages so that you guys can see it, because this we're getting to the really cool part now. So we've fixed pretty much all of our issues. We've made some major improvements to the system. We've made some major changes to the system, and everything is looking pretty good. So like I said, if you guys want to see more, then stick around and hop back on when we go live again, and you'll see that. So peace. Hey, I think it's the cool part. We're getting characters to walk around on the screen together. I think that's the cool part, in my opinion. Anyway, like I said, I'm going to head out, guys, and I'll see you guys in the next stream. Peace.